Hello and welcome. Welcome again to the next episode of The Wealth Shepherd. My name is Ed Guanill with Guanill Wealth Management. We've got another really good topic today. Today we're going to be talking about, is your family financially prepared for the unexpected? And when we talk about these types of things that we're going to discuss today, they're usually topics that we don't really want to talk about. And so these are really important topics that I think people should address before they retire and in retirement. And as we go through the show today, you may have some questions, maybe want to get some more information. You can always give us a call here at the office at 916-359-2750. Again, that's 916-359-2750. You'll always visit the website. And our website is edgwealth.com. That's www.edgwealth.com. If you'd like to hear this show after it's done, you can go to our resources tab on our website, click on the podcast, and you can see all the shows, listen to all the shows there. Or you can view us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course our YouTube page. So there are certain topics that can get really emotional pretty quickly, and money between parents and children is definitely one of them. I know personally, we've dealt with things in our family and down generations where money can really do things that you would hope would never happen to a family. And the reality is some financial and end-of-life decisions don't just affect you, they're going to have a lasting impact on your family. And in some cases, those decisions can really create confusion, tension, or even resentment down the road. And so one idea that tends to come up in these conversations is pretty simple, right? Let's avoid surprises. Let's plan before our feet are in the fire. By that time, it's usually too late. And so you really want to try to address these things in advance. Make sure that you have things detailed. And so we're going to walk through a handful of financial missteps that can create challenges for the next generation. And just as importantly, how those situations can often be handled more thoughtful with a little bit of planning. But before we jump into those topics, let me bring in our co-host, Jaclyn. She's always keeping the show on point and on track. How are you, Jaclyn?
Well, thank you, Ed. That's a great compliment. I appreciate it. And I really do try my best at that, but at some point I get distracted just as much. I'm doing well. How about you?
Good. This is our last show together. You're moving on to bigger and better things. So I'm really excited about doing this one with you and wrapping up this chapter. We
Yes.
wish you always the best of luck. And, it's been fun, but let's have a little more fun today.
Yes. Well, thank you, Ed. And you're right. I mean, this is the last of me, but it is definitely not the last of you. So, our listeners and viewers, please continue to check out Ed's podcast. He'll be continuing to do great things. And you're even talking about having some special guests on, and you're going to
Yeah.
take this podcast to a whole new level without me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With being a financial advisor, we don't have all the answers, but we know where to get the answers. So I think it's important to share other people's expertise in different planning topics that that help us. As advisors, we have coaches as well to help us get through our careers and to help us best help our clients. So I'm going to bring some of those people on that I work with so people can listen to other topics and get some different perspective and expertise on these different things that come up in life.
Well, that sounds amazing. And I can't wait to see who you bring on, what you guys talk about. I'll definitely be watching.
Good.
But let's get into today's topic because really, I mean, prepare for the unexpected, right?
Yeah.
How do you even do that? And
Well,
especially when it comes to your family, you even talked about it doesn't just affect you, it affects people in your family, in your household for generations.
yeah. And, I read an article from AARP, which I happen to be a member now.
Okay.
That's one of the clubs I never wanted to join, right? But here I am. But the article is called 5 Financial Mistakes That Will Make Your Kids Hate You. And just think about that. I always
Wow.
talk to our clients about planning for retirement and making sure that there's a transition plan that's not going to create problems for the kids and the grandkids. And one of those big topics is IRA planning.
Mm.
When a parent passes away, the spouse gets to treat that IRA just like their own. They don't have to do anything until they reach the age of RMDs, but there's nothing special they have to do. When non-spousal beneficiaries inherit IRA, it's a whole different story. Now what happens is that those beneficiaries have to take distributions within a certain period of time and pay the taxes on it. So when we talk about some of these things that don't just affect you, they can have a lasting impact on your family. That is just one topic that really needs to be discussed in detail with your financial advisor, and have a plan in place to help reduce the amount of taxes that are going to pass on to the kids. I always say you don't want to leave your kids a tax time bomb. Excuse me. You don't, excuse me. You don't want to leave your kids this tax time bomb. You want to plan in advance.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And I mean, it's in the topic of today's, prepare, but it's also planning and estate planning. And I think
Yes.
estate planning is the big overarching theme of a lot of different documents. I mean, so you're talking IRAs. What about wills and trusts? I mean, can we
Yeah.
talk a little bit on that?
One of the things that I try to require my clients to do is to have at least a conversation with a qualified estate planning attorney. Whether they choose to move forward or not is up to them, but it's important to understand, depending on what state you live in, the different laws that can impact how your estate transfers. In California is a community property state. So if you are in a second or third marriage and you have maybe a blended family, your estate plan is really important, excuse me, in determining how your assets are going to transfer to not just your kids, but also your new spouse or your ex-spouse. And so having an estate plan is going to help avoid, at least in California, it's going to help avoid probate. Because if you don't have these plans in place, the state of California has one for you, and that's called probate. So, you want to make sure that you have certain documents in place. The first and most important document are your durable power of attorneys. Those are the documents that dictate who can make decisions for you should you become incapacitated. And those durable power of attorneys are things for like your health care and your financial resources, so that someone doesn't have to report to probate for every, transaction to deal with your health or your finances. And, the reason that's important is because probate is very expensive and it takes a lot of time. And I'll just share a quick story with you. If people remember the musical artist John Denver, he was really popular in the 70s, and he passed away in Monterey, California. He died in a plane wreck, and he didn't have a will or a trust. And what happened was his estate was probated for several years, and it reduced the value of the estate by about 65% by the time the beneficiaries got what was left over. All that money went to probate, to attorneys. And so having an estate plan is extremely important to help make sure you avoid probate, but also make sure assets transfer just the way you want.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great reminder. I mean, you just touched on a will, a trust, beneficiaries, and I just want to point out something for our listeners and viewers, that beneficiaries trump a will and a trust. And so, you talked about blended families, and this is kind of where the family part comes in, is
Yeah.
you want to be careful about who your beneficiaries are. That is
Yeah.
the most important, because if you have maybe an ex-spouse accidentally, or, somebody on there that was 10 years ago, or your past kind of life there, you really
Sure.
want to be careful, because that will trump a will and a trust.
Yeah, 100%. So especially with your IRAs, life insurance policies, those types of things, your designated beneficiary, meaning the person you name as the beneficiary, that's who it's going to transfer to without probate. Where you have the problem is on the community property assets. That's where something could come up, where you want to make sure you have the estate documents in place to make sure it transfers as you and your spouse agree to make a transfer.
Yeah. Well, and Ed, we've talked a little bit kind of about the legal side, or more of
Yeah.
like the analytical side of things. Let's kind of move into maybe more of the emotional or psychology wise, having these open conversations, or maybe what should you do with your family before the unexpected happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to have these conversations. Again, sometimes, we don't want to have these conversations with the kids, the grandkids too early. We don't want to burden them with these decisions that they may have to make later. But it's absolutely important that, you have these conversations with your kids and grandkids on things like how your assets are structured, right?
Mhm.
Whether an inheritance is part of the plan, making sure that you have the key documents and they're organized and accessible. One of the things that we provide for all of our clients is something called the generational vault. And so it's an online cloud-based software where clients can keep their important documents so that, if there's ever a fire and the trust gets destroyed, there's one location for the people in their life to be able to access those documents. And it makes it really easy, right? You have a digital copy of these things, and it just lets them know where things are, how your assets are organized, and the way that they can access those assets in the event that they need to get to them.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that idea. I love that it's, you can give the information or give that access to anyone, no matter where they are. You might have
Yeah,
children that are across the country that might need to access it. And it's great to be all on the same page. And
100%.
that's what communication is for. And I think a lot of, maybe there's some a lot rivalries between siblings, and there's arguments that have to be had if
No,
something
really?
unexpected happens, right?
That really happens in families? We
Exactly.
we
Or
never think it's going to happen to our family.
yes, yes, because I mean, those conversations you think need to be this big elaborate thing, right? I
Yeah,
know, like from my own experience, my parents were worried about having that conversation with me because
yeah,
no one wants to have that conversation. No one wants to be like, "Well, actually, I kind of want this," or "This is what I want when you pass." No one
yeah.
wants to talk about that or even think about it. And so it's so important to just have conversations. Does not need to be a sit down at a family gathering. It doesn't need to be this big family meeting, all right? Every
Right.
Friday night at 6 p.m. No, just have open conversations.
Sure. Yeah. It's important. You brought up a good point there, and with sibling rivalries and things like that. But you have to make sure that those things are accessible. One of the things that I do for my clients is I provide them with a cover page for their estate plan. And basically what this cover page says is don't do anything until you call Ed Guanill. And that is so I can help their kids not make a bad mistake, right?
Mhm.
Not take a distribution from an account that they didn't expect. I have had a client one time. I was in Louisiana at a conference. I get a call from this client, or from the son. I knew my client was ill and he had passed away. And the son says, "Hey, my dad passed away and I got this check and I don't know what to do with it." And I said, "Well, what check are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, I got the check from the IRA, and the check was like $250,000. And I told him, "Well, you're going to have to set aside about 100,000 of that for taxes now because you made a mistake in taking that withdrawal." So, back to those documents, it's really important to have those things in place and to talk to your family about what you expect to happen, and also who your advisors are. Right? Make sure your kids know who your advisors are, so they know the CPA, they know the attorney, they know the financial advisor, they know who to call before they get themselves into some sort of trouble.
Do you remember, years ago when you used to have the emergency phone numbers on the
Oh
fridge?
yeah,
And it's like, why isn't that a thing anymore? Why don't we
yeah.
have emergency phone numbers on the fridge and stuff like this? I need my financial advisor's phone number on the fridge.
100%, 100%. And part of that cover page that I give my clients, it also has key contacts. So it has, my name, it has, the number to the
Yes.
custodian, it has the number to the customer service in case they can't get a hold of me. So we try to provide that information to them, and encourage them to really share that, But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well,
beneficiary is important. Okay.
yeah. And so I want to also talk about maybe a step, back here and talking about what are maybe some big mistakes or underestimates or something
Yeah,
like that for just retirement itself. I mean, what
sure.
is maybe missed?
So one of these mishaps, right, is underestimating retirement costs, and especially healthcare and
Oh,
longevity. Not only can this put a lot of stress on your financial plan later in life, it can also put a lot of stress on your family to have to
mhm.
figure out how to cover these unexpected costs. I just read an article this morning when I was having coffee, and it was a Fidelity 2026 retirement healthcare cost estimate report. And what this report shared was, this is the 25th annual retiree healthcare report, and it projects that a 65-year-old retiring in 2026, okay, will spend an average of $185,500 on healthcare and medical expenses over their lifetime. That's an increase of 7.5% just from last year, okay? And so rarely do you see financial plans that include healthcare and longevity expectancies and the cost that can be associated with it. One of the questions I'll always ask my clients when they're coming into the process is, tell me about your home. And they always wonder why I ask this question. Do you have a mortgage, right? What's the balance? What's the interest rate? Is your home conducive to aging? And they look at me really weird. It's kind of like when you whistle at a dog and they go, huh?
Yeah.
They go, is my house, what does that mean exactly? Well, is it 1 story? Is it 2 story? Will you have to add ADA features in there? Tell me about the house, right? Because I want to know, we need to estimate these costs into your financial plan, because as much as we hope it never happens, right? We all want to die quietly in our sleep at home. But the reality is, most of us are going to need some level of care before we pass away. And if you could do that in your home, then let's factor in those retirement costs or those healthcare costs and the cost of making those changes. So underestimating certain retirement costs is a big mishap that people make, because, again, it's one of those things that we hope never happens, but the probability is increasing every day as we live longer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you're right. It's not just about healthcare or even longevity. There's so many more things that are underestimated. I mean, just in retirement in general. And that's what you do, Ed, is you put together a comprehensive strategy for retirement, for every part of taxes that we talk about, and, that will, the trust, all those things encompass in a strategy, a plan that is essentially should be tested and bulletproof for the unexpected, for if that were to happen, because that it does. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The unexpected does happen.
100%. And you have to revisit that plan regularly. That's important, because, retirement's not linear. Things are going to happen. Things are going to change. There's going to be life changes, right? You may have an injury to an elder parent or elder relative that you didn't plan, that you may have to take care of them, or the kids grow up, they're going to have weddings. You may want to help them to buy a house and things like that maybe you didn't factor in. So it's important that you retest your retirement plan regularly. And one of the things that we do is we do quarterly reviews with our clients. And every year we also retest that plan. We rerun some of the numbers to see, hey, what's happening this year? Any big vacations planned? Oh, the grandkids are getting married. What's that going to look like? And so you want to retest that plan periodically to make sure that you stay on track for these unforeseen circumstances.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Now, Ed, with the time that we have left in today's episode, I do want to touch on the other article, which is a Huntington Bank article, and it's titled Outsmarting Fraud: 5 Effective Ways to Protect Your Wealth. And fraud is becoming such a huge thing, especially targeting at that retirement age or the elderly, really.
My goodness, it is so big. Remember, these fraudsters have 24 hours a day to figure out how to rob us, right? And just yesterday, I was doing a review with a client, and he was telling me that he was frauded, almost got hit with a $10,000 fraud on his credit card, because these people called him. They knew everything about him. They said they were from the Experian credit monitoring service. Everything lined up for him. And once he gave him the credit card number, he felt that remorse, that shock, and he called the credit card company and said, hey, this is what happened. Did I do the right thing? And they said, no, that is a fraud and that is a scam. And so you've got to be really, really careful. These financial scams have become so sophisticated. When it happens, you want to bring a trusted family member into the conversation or reach out to the appropriate financial institutions early, as fast as possible. And I'll just say this about fraud that happens. Your bank, your financial institutions, Social Security, all of these different people that you deal with in your financial life, they will never call you and ask you to verify your personal information. Okay. If you call them, they will verify you to make sure you are who you are, but they will never reach out to you and ask you for that personal information. If that happens, do not give it out. Hang up, call the institution that had just reached out and say, hey, I just got a call. Somebody wants to verify my information. Is this you? And they're more than likely going to tell you, no, that is a scam. So you've got to be really, really careful, especially with these things like phishing emails, text messages. They can be highly convincing. And then, of course, there's AI, right? AI now can model a family member's voice and call you under distress and ask for money. So, with your family members, you should have a safe word, right? A key word that you both know that if something's happening, you can know that it's the person you're talking to.
I love that idea. I love the safe word. I think mine would be like pineapple or something. How could you put that into a conversation?
Mine would be ravioli.
Oh, see that's easy. Well, I mean, you're absolutely right about all of this. I think scams and fraud are hugely impactful, in not a great way. And
Yeah,
the other red flag that I do want to point out is the urgency. Look at the urgency of these requests or texts or
absolutely.
emails. And if it is demanding something now or saying you have a timeline or I need this quickly or whatever it is, if it is very urgent, it is most likely a scam. So
Absolutely.
be aware of
100%.
that and also take the time to call that institution, double check. No, you have their phone number. If you're working with these people and they're true, you have their phone number.
That's
Call them
right.
back and say, hey, this is what I got. Tell me if this is right. Just double check things. Also, be aware of passwords. Continuously change your password.
Yeah.
Continuously use unique passwords, not the same for everything. Is there any other kind of red flags to point out here?
Yeah, I think, making sure, again, this kind of goes back to the original part of our conversation where trust can really serve as a cybersecurity purpose beyond estate planning because it limits the personal details available through public records. So it reduces your exposure to criminals who use that information really for identity theft and financial targeting. Okay. You can, protect wealth means protecting your identity, your accounts, your digital presence, and not just managing a portfolio. So you want to look at all of these things that we talked about today in these different layers and make sure that you have these conversations, you put your documents in place, and you also protect yourself.
Yeah, protect yourself and your family. I mean, that's what our conversation boils down to today, Ed.
That's right.
Well, why don't you share with our listeners one more time how they can get a hold of you for a complimentary consultation?
Absolutely. Anytime you'd like to reach out, you can always call me at 916-359-2750. That's direct to my office. You won't be calling 1-800-WHO cares. You'll get me on the phone, 916-359-2750. You can send me an email at ed@edgwealth.com. And please visit our website. We've got a lot of resources on there. The website again is www.edgwealth.com.
Well, thank you, Ed. And what a fantastic episode to end on. It has been truly a pleasure to work with you and for me to be on these podcasts with you. It's so fun to talk about all these different topics. I think this one might have been my favorite, just with the family tie in there. But I wish you absolutely the best and continue doing great things on this podcast. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for having me on. And that does it for this episode of The Wealth Shepherd with our host, Ed Guanill.
And we'll see you next time.